Good morning, everybody. It's an exciting week to be an SEC football fan. We're going to get into the NFL draft today. We're going to get into all sorts of things. Before we do that, off the top, just wanted to give some quick thoughts to all of our friends in Tuscaloosa. We know we have a lot of friends down there that watch our show every week, and we know this is a tough day for you guys, a day of reflection and remembrance about the awful tragedy that happened 10 years ago. So our thoughts and our prayers are with everybody in Tuscaloosa as they think back on everything that happened and everything they lost from 10 years ago. And so our hearts are with everybody and all of our friends down in Tuscaloosa. So a brighter note to get us moving forward. It's a week where there is a lot of good news for everybody that's a college football fan. This is a week where you get to see players that you've followed for years finally get some great news for themselves, finally get a reward for a lot of these guys that they've been working towards for their entire lives. So it's a fun week. If you care about college football players and you like to see good things happen to them, this is a really fun week to follow this sport. And I'm joined by two of my friends who also like to have a good time with me. That would be Matt Zenitz and John Talty. They both like to party. The NFL draft is my
name is Rod, and I like to party.
That's right. And I should say really quickly, for all of our friends having an NFL draft party this week, consider our sponsor for today's show, Milo's Hamburger Shop. For all of our friends around the state of Alabama, you already know about Milo's. I don't have to tell you how good it is. But Milo's is sponsoring all of our NFL draft coverage this week. So props to them.
Beautiful.
There it is. They have nuggets now. So definitely some good party food.
Some nugs.
That's right. So
I heard our friend Justin Yerkin's going big on Milo's for his draft party.
Yeah, it's it's great. It's great party food. And speaking of nuggets, I know you guys are always full of good nuggets of information, and that's what we're going to get into today. We're digging into the draft. I'm going to make a little bit of a game of it in the first part of our show and ask you guys to give me kind of some over-unders, the classic gambling trope as we get into the NFL draft. But, there are a few, I think, known quantities going into Thursday night, going into the first round of this draft. But there's still a fair amount of mystery. There's still definitely a fair amount of debate going on. So to get us started, I'm gonna start with this one for you guys.
And I want to hear Jay Talt's opinion first, and I'll offer my.
Okay, we'll go with John first. Over under, John, 4 SEC players in the top 10.
Let me do the math here. I'm going to go under.
Under. So I mean, let's go through kind of the obvious picks.
Oof.
I mean, I put you right at the number. I feel like I'm the book here.
Yeah, so if I'm thinking about top 10 right now, I think it seems like right now, Mac Jones, that's 1.
Yeah.
Jamar Chase is 2. You feel like Waddle is probably 3. And so then, yeah, I mean, it feels like it's a push. I mean, you feel like at least one of Devonta Smith and Patrick Surtain is probably in the top 10, but I could see both of them being just outside the top 10. Some good Vegas odds right there. I mean, my initial inclination now is to say push, but it's tough.
Yeah. Matt, what's your feeling?
You made it 3.5 or something like that, 4.5. So that
I know I should have given you an interval there.
Push me one way or the other.
Yeah, I agree with John. The push would probably be the safe bet there, but I'll throw something out from a different perspective. So we've obviously seen these guys play a lot during the course of the last few years, including last season. And the biggest thing that I can say is that if I were an NFL evaluator or somebody running an NFL organization, there are some people in the top 10 that would be no doubters for me. So Kyle Pitts is obviously one. It's just a generational talent at tight end. I think he's going to be an absolute stud at the next level. Jamar Chase, one of the interesting things about him. So during this time of year, we always love the comparisons to current or former NFL players, and just helps to give you a feel for what these guys are capable of. The comparison that I always like for Jamar Chase is that he has some Terrell Owens type qualities as a player. Obviously, we all know what Terrell Owens did just as far as on the field, and that's something always that has stuck out to me about him, and you can see it when you watch his game, just the physical traits that he has and some of those characteristics that would lead to that kind of comparison that actually came from somebody on staff at LSU. To go along with that, you have the two Alabama receivers, which for me, you have a choice between Devontae Smith, who to me is the second coming of Marvin Harrison, and then Jalen Waddle, who I think is as close to Tyreek Hill as anybody in this draft. Those would be guys that if I had a needed wide receiver or was looking to add somebody at that position, those guys would be targeted for me. And then Patrick Surtain also to go along with that, just an absolute stud at corner. And I think that whether it's top 10, top 15, that can feel confident that not only him, but another SEC corner, J.C. Horn, who I think people in the state probably remember for just his performance against Auburn and the one-on-one matchup against Seth Williams. Both of those guys probably in position to go at some point during the top 15 and players that I would feel confident betting on to be successful at the next level.
I've been swung over. I'm going over at 4 now because I think
after thinking about it.
What?
4 in the top 10, though. I mean, that's
I think it's going to be over now because Zenith swung me because I think Mac will be there. I think Mac's going to go 3rd. I think Kyle Pitts sounds like could go 4. Chase could go 5. That's 3 right there. And then I think that at least 2 out of Waddle, Devonta Smith, Patrick Surtain, and J.C. Horn, 2 out of that 4 probably goes top 10. So I'm going over. I think it's going to be 5 or more.
all right. Busy early part of the round for the SEC. Let's now you mentioned a few of these names already from Alabama. We obviously know it's going to be a big Thursday night for Alabama, but we don't know exactly how big yet. So let's get into that here. And I'm going to start with John again on this one. So John, I'm giving you the interval number this time, plus or minus 5.5 Bama players in the first round.
I think I go under there because again, let's do it. Mac Jones is 1, Devonta 2, Jalen 3, Surtain that's 4. You think, I could easily see an argument that both Najee and Christian Barmore go in the first round, which puts you at 6. But I think one of them somehow slips. So I think it's going to end up being 5. So I take the under.
Matt, how are you feeling about those two names right there, Najee and Barmore, right now? Just what's kind of the buzz on those two guys in terms of first round potential?
And Najee, based on just growth from 2019 to 2020, has put himself in a position where he has a chance to be the first running back selected. Unfortunately for running back, sometimes those guys are devalued to the point that maybe they can slip a little bit, even if they're identified as the top player at their position in the draft. But I would say the worst case scenario for Najee is that he'll be in position to go at some point during the second round, even though it does seem like he has a realistic shot to go at some point late in the first round. Christian Barmore is a little bit more of a wild card where there are some concerns as far as NFL evaluators about him. And even just looking at it strictly from an on-the-field standpoint, just the inconsistency last year where it had a great end of the season, but the first half of the year definitely didn't play to the level where had first-round tape at that point. The thing that helps him, and this has come up consistently in conversations, it's a very weak class for interior defensive linemen, and that's going to bump some of these guys up and could maybe lead to somebody like Christian Barmore going a little bit earlier than he would otherwise, potentially even somewhere in the top 20 to 25.
Yeah, that's the other factor here that we haven't really talked about that gets messy when all of this stuff is when picks start to be traded. And I know there's it seems like this year more than normal even, there's a ton of speculation and chatter about teams trying to trade up or down in the order.
Yeah, I think you're going to see, it's at this point, everybody knows who the first 2 picks are going to be. It's going to be Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson. And then a lot of people think Mac Jones is going to be 3. We'll see if that ends up happening. But I think, so if Mac Jones does go 3, then the draft really starts at 4. And I think you could see, there's, Trey Lance and Justin Fields, where those 2 guys go, I think could have a big impact. If they both go, say, in the top 7, then you're going to see some pretty good guys just being forced to slip because 5 quarterbacks go in the top 7. So that's going to have an impact. I agree with what Zenit said. I mean, there's just no, like you said, no real good interior defensive lineman. I could certainly argue that Barmore is not a first-round talent, but if you need one and if you're drafting based on need, then I could see him being late in the first round. I could see potentially, in that 29 to 32 range where a team trades up from the second, trades a high second round pick, maybe some, a future round pick to get in at the very end of the first round to grab Barmore if you need that interior defensive lineman. Najee seems to be getting a lot of buzz around the Steelers. There's certainly a need there for the Steelers. Najee seems to fit that general style of what they like. So that could be an interesting fit for him.
I'll tell you another one, John. Sorry to interrupt you, but on Najee, the other one that we hear a ton of as we've been putting out our Road to the Pros documentary series on Najee, everywhere we put it, whether it's on YouTube or Twitter, Dolphins fans are all over it. I mean, they are clamoring for this guy.
Well, I think they like the idea of, maybe getting Waddle at 6, you add Najee at 18, and then you just roll out Alabama's offense again.
From the 2017 national title game, basically, yeah.
Pretty much. Though it might be a little awkward given that, Waddle also said he'd prefer Mac Jones over Tua.
Yeah.
So, that could get weird next year, and I think, Najee might feel the same way. But, I think that – I have seen that. I think that would be interesting. And, again, I think you might see some teams trade back. But it seems overall – both Najee and Travis Etienne from Clemson, two of the guys could potentially go, either late first round or so, or like Zenit said, maybe early second round.
Let's dig into. I mean, we've just been talking about him a little bit, but I want to get specific about it. Let's talk about Mac Jones. Mac, do we see right now? I mean, look, I know we all hear the stuff about San Francisco all the time. We'll get into how NFL fans, analysts all feel about that in a minute, but before we kind of dig into that side of it, I'll put the plus or minus here as just being in the top 5. Matt, how are you feeling about Mac Jones in the top 5 right now?
You're going to be disappointed with my answer. I mean, it's possible. I wouldn't be.
Yes, I agree. It's possible
because I'm not inside the room with the 49ers or some of these other teams. So just be throwing out an ill-informed guess to a certain degree. The thing I'll say about Mac Jones, and hopefully this lessens the disappointment with my answer, in talking to people, both coaches that worked with him at Alabama, coaches that coached against him as far as opposing SEC coaches, and then some people in the NFL personnel world also, the consistent feedback that I've gotten is that they feel like his game translates well to the next level. Is it consistent that they believe he deserves to be a top 5 pick? No, but it has come up consistently that they feel like his game translates well. And the big knock, obviously, is he doesn't have a standout trait. He's not 6'6", 240 pounds. He doesn't have the big arm. He's not a 4'4" guy in the 40. But the thing that was thrown out, and this was thrown out by multiple people, is that while he doesn't have an elite physical trait, he does have an elite quality in his mind. So that would be my counterpoint to people saying that Mac Jones maybe doesn't deserve to be a top 5, top 10 pick or whatever because of the lack of an elite characteristic. To these evaluators, these people that actually work in football, while he doesn't have the elite trait from a physical standpoint, he is a guy with elite mind. And then to go along with that, something else that people definitely commend Mac for is the resolve. And not just for the way he bounced back from the couple picks against Auburn back in 2019, but even if you look at the Georgia game this past season, had the pick, I think it was on the first play from scrimmage. It would have been easy to go in the tank at that point, let that affect him moving forward in a huge nationally televised game, but ends up bouncing back, moving on from it, and throwing for 417 yards against one of the better defenses in the country. That's something that sticks out to people in the coaching world, the personnel world, because obviously you're going to mess up at the NFL level, and it's very important as a quarterback to be able to move on from it and bounce back, and that's something that he's shown the capability to do during the course of the last couple of years.
John, are NFL guys going to talk themselves out of picking Mac in the top 5? What do you think?
I mean, are we talking NFL analysts or are we talking NFL?
We'll get into analysts in a second here, but I mean, and we can.
I'll throw one more thing at John, and hey, he can follow up on this and let us know if he agrees with it. So one of the personnel people that I was referencing, who works for a team that's in the market for a quarterback, I asked him where, because he's watched all of these guys, where he would rank Mac personally among the 5 quarterbacks widely projected to go in the first round. And this is not a knock on Mac, but he, on his individual rankings, had Mac 5th out of those 5 quarterbacks. So views Mac as a guy who, once again, thinks the game will translate well, thinks he can be productive, doesn't necessarily view him as a Pro Bowl type guy, but views him 5th out of those 5 quarterbacks.
Well, I think there are a couple of things to take away from that. I think one, I think sometimes we think about these things purely in a vacuum and not whether this is the right fit for this person and how is that team going to develop a person. And I've referenced this on the show in the past. I'm a long-suffering Jets fan. There are a lot of guys who have gone to the Jets and have not had their right system around them, the right infrastructure around them for them to be successful, and they fail. And there's always going to be that what if they had gone to a different organization, would they have done better? And we hear stories of guys like Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes coming into situations where they could sit for a little bit, learn behind a quarterback, have a great offensive-minded coach to help them, and then they end up having a lot of success. It's not purely just talent. There's a system behind it that I think helps guys be successful. I think if Mac doesn't go to San Francisco at 3, he's not going top 5. I don't think anybody – it seems like San Francisco views him higher than anybody at this point. And it could be in part because Kyle Shanahan has had a lot of success with quarterbacks, like Mac Jones. I mean, the comparison that I think a lot of people have made in, recent weeks is Matt Ryan, who Shanahan obviously worked with Atlanta and had a lot of success and should have won a Super Bowl with against the Patriots a few years back. And so there's been that comparison between, Mac and Matt. And I think Matt Ryan is also someone who maybe doesn't have elite traits, but is very smart, and you know exactly what you're getting with him. So that's something that I think that needs to be, kept in mind. But so we'll see. I mean, if you pay attention to what the NFL insiders are putting out there, they say that San Francisco is likely choosing between Mac Jones and Trey Lance. Personally, out of those 2, I'd rather have Mac Jones. I think Trey Lance screams bust to me, just based from what I've seen and people I've talked to. But again, it just depends on where you land. That you could put Trevor Lawrence in the Jaguars. We'll see what happens there. And if you had put him on a different team, he might have a whole different experience. I think that's something that just we don't think enough about.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about the analyst side of this, John, because I'm not a guy. Admittedly, I have lived in Alabama basically my whole life. I follow primarily the college game. I mean, I'm certainly aware of the bigger stories going on in the NFL, but I don't dig heavily into the NFL analysis the way that maybe some other guys do. And it's always funny this time of year to me to see the debates, the passion going on from NFL analysts and fans about college players that you can tell they have not watched at all until basically the last couple of months. And so they have very strong opinions of these guys that have been formed in a very short period of time. And it feels like Mac Jones is the guy this year that is doing that among NFL people. And I'm curious what you feel, because John, I know you've been, I mean, really both of you have spent a lot of time in NFL markets and have been part of that kind of ecosystem of NFL, talk and analysis. But Mac Jones, just something seems to really bug NFL folks about Mac Jones. That you can't find a video on him or a post about him without comments underneath it saying, he's trash. This guy wouldn't have done any of this stuff if he didn't have these elite wide receivers, if he didn't have this great offensive line. And look, these are discussions we had during the Heisman campaign, I guess, but I don't feel like we saw the same level of vitriol about it.
I think there's a couple of different factors here. I think one, it's like you said, it happens every single year where a lot of the people who cover the NFL or pay attention to NFL just don't watch college football. It's obvious because it comes down to this time every single year where they either talk themselves into guys that we all have known have been very good for a while. Like, oh, wow, this guy's great. It's like, yeah, we've known that for 3 years. Or there's some little trait about a guy that we think is very good that they talk themselves out of. And then we look back 5 years and he's really good in the NFL, and all the college guys are like, yeah, he was great in college. We of course thought he was going to be good in the NFL. There's always a couple of those guys. I think this year in particular, one of the factors is that everyone knows who the top 2 picks are. So Trevor Lawrence has been locked in for number 1 for a long time now.
Sure.
And then Zach Wilson has seemingly been locked in at number 2 for a while now. So everybody's been kind of, I think, looking at that number 3 pick. And so the fact that Mac Jones is potentially going at 3, I think is why there's so much attention on him. Whereas in past years, there's more uncertainty at that number 1 spot. And we're talking a lot more about who should be number 1 rather than like who's the number 3 pick. I think why he triggers people so much, it's like, Matt said, I think there's not the elite traits. I think NFL guys become obsessed with elite traits. I think it's why some people have Zach Wilson as the number 1 quarterback, because he does some crazy stuff. And they discount the fact that he played against very bad competition. And so with Mac, it's the opposite. He doesn't have those elite traits. But what you were seeing in a lot of, I think, the negative analysis around him is that they probably didn't watch a lot of his games. So they're discounting what he did against the best competition in the country game after game this past year. I mean, he had an incredible year, and that gets written off as, oh, he just had a lot of talent around him. Yeah, of course he did. But the funny thing, I think, is that did Trevor Lawrence not have a lot of good talent around him? Did Joe Burrow not have a lot of talent around him last year? Did Tua not have a lot of talent around him? Like, typically, the top teams with the best quarterbacks have a lot of talent around them. I mean, Joe Burrow had a guy in Justin Jefferson who was probably the best rookie wide receiver last year, and a guy in Jamar Chase who's probably going to go top 5 this year. Like,
right. By the end,
wide receivers.
By the time all those guys are done with their college careers, that 2019 LSU offense was probably pretty loaded with NFL players.
Absolutely. And that's not discounted. I think Joe Burrow is a better quarterback than Mac Jones. But I think it's funny how we just, we don't use that argument for certain guys, but then because we've decided we don't think Mac is good, we're going to just keep hammering him, for those reasons. So I'll give you this. This might be a hot take, but I believe in it pretty strongly. If I had to pick between their next 10 years, who's going to be better, I would take Mac Jones over Tua at this point. I believe that his traits translate better. And I think what we've seen behind the scenes, what I've heard about, what I know about him, I think he has a better shot to process things at the NFL level better than Tua. And I think that's going to allow him to be successful better and more substantially long-term than Tua is at this point.
I mean, I think John, well, let me just say real quickly, Matt, I think that is an aspect that, again, I'm gonna be biased towards the college side of this, but I think that's a thing that college people probably have a little bit better understanding of why you would say something like that, John, than NFL guys do, because they just they just look at the measurable stuff, right? And I mean, the truth is, in terms of what was surrounding them, Tua had every advantage that Mac had, and yet Mac's winning percentage, his completion percentage, almost every measurable stat that you can accomplish at Alabama was better for Mac than it was for Tua. And I know the sample size was different, but in some ways, Mac accomplished something in his season as a starter that Tua was not able to do as a full-time starter. So I think that's a good example of the kind of things that guys who only pay attention to these players for a few months a year don't really have the depth of understanding of who these players are sometimes. Go ahead, Matt. Sorry to interrupt.
So the thing I wanted to follow up on, John is not the only person that feels like that. So I asked somebody who was on staff at Alabama with both of those players while gathering feedback for something I'm working on this week on Mac, who he feels like long-term is going to be a better player at the NFL level between Mac and Tua. And what he threw out is similar to what John said, that the safer bet is Mac, because of some of the qualities and characteristics that we've talked about. And that's not to take anything away from Tua, because Tua has some special qualities. You saw flashes last year. So this is not to take anything away from him. But at the same time, threw out earlier just about the game translating well. The reason that people feel like that the game or that his game translates well is because he's accurate, gets the ball out on time, going to follow the game plan, and overall a guy that can be depended on to get the ball out at the right time and to the right place. He's efficient, and that's a reason that I think quarterback coaches at the next level are going to be big fans of Mac Jones. So my opinion has changed some throughout the course of the lead up to the draft, because I'm one of these people that falls in the category typically of if you're taking somebody in the top 5, whether it's a quarterback or another position, that person should have some elite, rare physical characteristic. But the more that I've heard about Mac, the more I believe that even without necessarily having a standout physical characteristic, that this is a player that could be, I don't know if it's a Matt Ryan or somebody like that, but a guy who can be successful at the next level. And something that I was told to look at by somebody in the coaching world is look at the Pro Bowl rosters for quarterbacks, the quarterbacks who have made the Pro Bowl throughout the course of the last few years and even last year. And the thing I'll pull up and throw out to you guys is the NFC quarterback team from last year as far as quarterbacks. You have Drew Brees, you have Aaron Rodgers, you have Kirk Cousins, you have Russell Wilson. How many of those guys has a Patrick Mahomes level arm or Josh Allen level arm? Maybe none of them. So the point that was made, as appealing as it is to have a guy who can throw the ball 85 yards, most of the top quarterbacks in the NFL don't have these standout physical traits. And the thing that allows those 4 quarterbacks or some of the other top quarterbacks around the league to be successful is the ability to be accurate and being a guy that can be consistently depended on to get the ball out at the right time to the right place and being efficient. And I think Mac falls in that category.
And again, I know this is probably considered cheesy stuff from NFL guys who love to be super analytical and data driven, but
it's easy not to dunk on the nerds.
But you also as a quarterback have to, part of that job is working well with other people and having good relationships. And not every guy that has a rocket arm is able to do that, is naturally good at that. A lot of them try to do it by sheer force of will and alpha dog everybody, and it doesn't always work out. And we've heard many stories of that. And I honestly do think that having a guy who the rest of the team likes playing for and wants to succeed with him as their guy, that can make up for a few extra yards of arm power. We can more than make up for that. So, I think it's probably a bigger deal at the college level than the NFL level because the talent level is so much higher in the pros. But I still think it matters. And you talk to anybody who played with Mac on that team last year, and we've talked to quite a few. They will all tell you in not the typical cheesy college athlete answers that Mac was a guy that they all really got along with and played for and felt, leadership from.
No, Scalise, I think that's a great point. And I don't think it's cheesy at all. I think that you, as a quarterback, you're going to be the face of the franchise, and the most pressure is going to be put on you to deliver. And ultimately, if things go well, you're going to be making the most money out of anybody on the team. So you're going to be demanded to do the most. And your ability to galvanize that locker room full of grown men is a really important thing. And I think if you do look at the teams that are best, it's usually they believe in the quarterback, and teams that, on the flip side, guys say like Jameis Winston, who has a lot of the pure talent. And then, I remember thinking about watching his, remember that famous pregame speech where he's talking about eating W's. You're just kind of like, this guy's a joke. Like, there's no one who's going to buy into that. And the ability to naturally lead, I think, is very important. And I agree with you. I think Mac has that. To go to Zennis's point earlier that I think is interesting, and I agree with, is that for a long time, like you said, top 5, you want an elite talent. And I think it's really only changed in the last few years. I mean, there are not 5 elite quarterbacks in this draft. I think we know that. But the game has changed so much that there's such an emphasis on quarterbacks, and rookie contracts are workable enough that it's almost worth taking a shot in the top 5 at a QB, because if it hits, your entire franchise is different. And if it misses, you try again in 3 years, basically. I mean, that just seems to be the cycle at this point, where should Mac Jones go number 3 overall based on all of his skills? Probably not. But if you believe he is the guy that can take you to the next level, and San Francisco's gotten close a couple times, then it's worth taking him at 3, even if he's not as pure of a talent as, say, a Jamar Chase or a Jalen Waddle or some other kind of freak athlete.
All right, go ahead, Matt.
Scalise will appreciate about Mac Jones. So this is something one source brought up with him.
Did you go to his birthday party?
What'd you say?
Did people go to his birthday party?
Wait, what was the birthday party?
So this is a birthday reference. Go ahead.
You'll have to explain that to me afterwards. But the comparison that Scalise, I think, will love, and John might appreciate it also, even though John's a harder critical me than Scalise is. So one source compared Mac to one of Scalise's favorite people. So he compared him to the Alabama version of Steve Rogers. So I think we've all seen the picture at this point. And I'm being serious. It's the real comparison that was made. So,
oh, gosh.
But I think we've all seen the picture at this point of what Mac looked like when he first got to Alabama, and what that source threw out. Arrived at Alabama looking like the pre-Captain America version of Steve Rogers, and developed into what he ultimately became.
I will say based on those cigar photos that came out Tennessee week, he does not look like Steve Rogers anymore, for sure.
I'm disappointed now that we've gotten, so in terms of potential top 10 picks, we've now gotten Mac Jones as Steve Rogers and Kyle Pitts as Spider-Man. It's really a missed opportunity by us to not have Zenitz give us an Avenger comparison for everybody.
I know. Yeah. We'll work on that later on Twitter, maybe.
Who's
All
Zach
right.
Wilson? Is that Hawkeye?
Well, what's the Marvel guy? What's the comparison for Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle?
Definitely. Look, the easiest one is that
because all I'm doing is
that we've got
other people's stories. I'm not clever or creative enough to come up with this stuff on my own. I'm just sharing other people's they've thrown out that very
yes.
Okay. So what is the Matt Scalise, Billy Joel lookalike
the easy. I'm not going to do the whole top 10, but the easiest comparison is that Trevor Lawrence is Thor from the early movies back, because I think there's a perceived
Thor.
No, he's got the hair. He's got the perceived kind of arrogance that you want from Thor. You know, he's definitely, I think, he's had his humbling experience where he only won one national title during his college career. So you have to go through some adversity before you can be worthy. So I think he's a pretty good 1-to-1 with Thor. But I don't know. I don't know about there's too many quarterbacks. It's a problem.
Who would Jalen Waddle be? Who would Devontae Smith be?
Let's get into Jalen. Let's wrap up our show today really quick by talking about Devontae Smith versus Jalen Waddle, because I think it does seem like at this point they're both going to go pretty early. Everybody seems to really like both of these guys. But is there if you're a team that's picking, what is kind of the key difference that you're looking at between these two guys, and what would make you necessarily choose one over the other, John?
Well, first off, I just want to give a shout out to one of our loyal First Down South listeners, my buddy Kevin. He and I have been debating Smith versus Waddle for about a year now. So he'll love this debate because he totally disagrees with me. But I mean, there's multiple different factors. I think it comes down to fit and how you want to use them and what you need. Personally, to me, if I had to pick one of the two, Jerry Black.
Jerry Black. I do not encourage that type of talk, Jerry.
I would go Devonta. I like Devonta a little bit better. I've been a Devonta guy for a while now. I thought that, I thought he was underrated, a year ago behind, Judy and Ruggs. And I think he was underrated for a lot of this year because of all the hype that Waddle got. And Waddle's incredible, and I think you can use him a lot of different ways. But if Smith ends up being kind of even anywhere close to Marvin Harrison, like Zenit said, I mean, that's a guy who can be consistent for you for many years and really change your offense. I know people are concerned about his weight. It's kind of weighed over him the entire draft process. And I get the concern. I think there's worries about he's going to get beat up and he's going to get stuffed, at the line and things like that. But I just think he's so smooth. I think he works so hard, and I think he's just such a complete wide receiver in many ways that I think you draft him, and I think he's going to be a stud for you for a decade.
I think it just comes down to which wide receiver you want more. Do you want Marvin Harrison or do you want a Tyreek Hill-like player? I don't think you can go wrong with either one. It's just a matter of which skill set fits that specific team. But thing I'll say, Henry Ruggs went number 12 last year. I would be more comfortable betting on both of these guys to be consistently productive long-term than I would be on Henry Ruggs, who went number 12 overall. And I think Henry Ruggs has I mean, obviously the standout speed, probably one of the faster players in the NFL at this point. And I think he can do some good things at the next level. But I would bet on both of these guys to be more consistently productive than Henry Ruggs. And I think both of them have some special characteristics. I don't think you can go wrong with either one as long as they both stay healthy.
I agree. It's just interesting to me that it's just based on, what people need this year and things like that. But there's a chance that Devonta Smith will go last out of Waddle, Ruggs, Judy in terms of where they're drafted, which is just kind of wild to me, given that, he just won the Heisman as a wide receiver.
I do think his physicality is underrated. I think people focus so much on that, but it's the more we watched him last year, the more and he started becoming more and more dominant, the more obvious it was to me that as fast a guy as he is and as physically talented as he is, you can go back and look at all of his best plays, and it's always an understanding of how the actual play works, right? It's almost always his success is built around his mental understanding of what's happening on the football field, much more so, I think, than his just pure speed and physical ability. He is a guy who has an intellectual grasp of the game and of his position in a way that I think very few wide receivers do. And I don't think he would have been able to be as dominant as he was if it was just based on his physical talent.
Wait, one thing that I'll throw out as a follow-up, though, is it's easy to forget now just because Jalen Waddle missed a lot of last season due to the injury. But if you go back to the build-up to the season and then the early part of the year, more people than not, both internally at Alabama and then other people in the SEC coaching world viewed, and this is crazy to say considering Devonta Smith won the Heisman, but viewed Jalen Waddle as the better, more dynamic, more dangerous player leading up to the injury. And it's not like they thought Devonta Smith was a bad player by any means, but more people than not, once again, both internally at Alabama and in the SEC coaching world, viewed at that point, pre-injury, Jalen Waddle as the better, more dangerous, more dynamic guy. And if you look back, if I remember correctly with the numbers, he even had better numbers at that point than Devonta Smith also. So I'll repeat, just so people don't think I'm hating on Devonta Smith, I think both are going to be very good players at the next level. And Devonta obviously had a special season, but it's easy to forget to a certain degree, just because he missed a lot of last year, how special and dynamic Jalen Waddle is.
Yeah, I mean, Waddle has that kind of electrifying aspect to him that I think even Devonta doesn't necessarily do. Like, Devonta's a little smoother to me, whereas Waddle just does these things that kind of make you go wow, maybe a little more. I mean, Devonta had some incredible catches this past year too that made you go wow. But I mean, I was, before we did the show, I was watching, somebody had shared a clip on Twitter of his punt return against LSU, Waddle's, and you're just kind of like, wow, that's pretty insane. And so I think it's going to be really interesting, again, where he goes and how they use him, because I think at a minimum from day one, he can be, if you want to use him this way, an incredibly dynamic either punt returner or kick returner for you. Let him develop a little bit like that. And, like Zenit said, I think his ceiling is probably Tyreek Hill, who I think you can argue is probably the most electrifying player in the NFL from a receiver standpoint. Devonta is not that. I just think that I think the floor for Devonta is higher than Waddle. But I think I could agree that
low bust potential.
The ceiling for Waddle could be higher than Devonta.
Yep.
And the special teams part of it is worth taking note of also. And it makes me think back to something a coach threw out at some point during the course of last year, that Jalen Waddle, just looking at it strictly from a returner standpoint, probably the best punt returner in college football during the course of at least the last 5 years. So that's another area of the game where he will likely have a significant impact, or could have a significant impact at the next level.
Well, definitely going to be an interesting weekend for the NFL draft. Certainly on Thursday night, a dramatic first round in store potentially. But we will have tons of coverage for you on AL.com and all of our social channels here, brought to you by Milo's, our friends over at Milo's, and they're sponsoring all our draft coverage this week, which also includes the Road to the Pros series that you can see on both Najee Harris and Anthony Schwartz. Those are out there wherever you're watching this right now. Definitely particularly recommend the new episode of the Najee Harris series, where we were able to get a hold of Marshawn Lynch talking about Najee Harris, and he was
not correct. You got a hold of Daddy, not Marshawn Lynch.
That's right, Daddi, as he wishes to be known in that documentary. So go and check him out. We've got draft profile videos on basically every potentially draftable player from Alabama and Auburn up on our YouTube channels as well. So go and check those out with some fun insights there from their former teammates. And we'll have lots of other coverage coming from John Talty and Matt Zenitz and the rest of the crew wherever you can find AL.com content. So thanks everybody for watching us on First Down Sound.
Comparisons from Tuscaloosa to go along with it. So I'm going to be very disappointed if I see those draft profiles and I don't see here some Marvel DC comparison for each of these prospects.
Maybe I'll do pick by pick gifts on draft night, Matt. Maybe I'll do that for you.
I like that bit.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everybody.